Thanks for coming on this holiday weekend. Hopefully you have fun things going on. So I'm very excited to have the second part of our nutrition series. Last month we had Dr. Chuka from Hogue come and talk about antioxidants and how to get more in. This month we have James, who's a registered dietitian. I was very excited to find him. We started last month about how it's really plants and not non-processed foods are the ones that have the most antioxidants and are really the best for our health. And after having done some research myself, I started to learn more about this. And then I was really looking for a dietitian, though, to work with, because as much as I can read and research and learn some information, it is not the same as someone who has the educational background and work experience of what is all this information and how do you handle, different health conditions, what are all the nutrients to make sure that you're getting all the nutrients that you need. So James is here today to give us an introduction, and I'm thinking maybe even we'll be able to have you back sometime, because I'm guessing that there'll be a lot of questions and a lot of interest in this topic.
Yeah.
So I'll let James introduce himself a little bit further.
All right, I'm in the right spot. So my name is James. Yeah, I'm a registered dietitian, and the EN is environmental nutritionist. With our practice, it's called Married to Health. So we do see patients one-on-one. We also do a lot of presentations and do a lot of online work as well. We specialize in plant-based, also known as vegan nutrition. But again, we take a holistic approach. So we look at kind of what's stressing you out in your everyday life. What are also other stress factors like You have a major focus on nutrition and food and how it relates to your health, but also other environmental factors as well. So for him there, so I am a holistic registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist, and a husband and father. So my wife is also a dietitian, and we work together, and we have a 2-year-old daughter who has also been plant-based her entire life as well. So today we're going to talk about the benefits of being plant-based for Parkinson's and beyond, how to be plant-based at home, in restaurants, and other tips, and kind of talk about and kind of go over the environment and choosing organic, and more question and answers, kind of with any questions any of you have. So this acronym, WFPB. So I always call it a whole food plant-based lifestyle. So there's a big difference from saying plant-based as opposed to saying vegan, right? So what this does is, again, kind of what Claire mentioned, is kind of going back to the whole foods, going back to eating unprocessed. So the example I give, right, and the way I say food can be a drug. So what do I mean? So let's talk about cocaine. And you're like, what? So cocaine comes from a plant, right? The cocoa plant. And then they found out we can make cocaine. And then if we process it more, we can make crack, right? So in a lot of ways, food can be similar. So we made corn plant, and we made corn syrup, and then we made high fructose corn syrup. So each one more addictive than the other. So in our society, when you look at your food, you have to look at where it came from and how processed is it. Because along the way, we make it, basically the idea is you want to eat more of it, and you become almost addicted to it. But along the way, as it gets processed, if you think of the question, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll keep it open and fun and kind of not too formal. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and I'll answer it the best I can. So with this whole food plant-based lifestyle, what does it give you? So what we find is you increase your fiber. You do get plenty of amino acids, because one thing I'm asked a lot is, what about protein, right? If I say I'm vegan or I'm plant-based, what about your protein? Where do you get your protein? So we'll talk about that. You get plenty of omega-3s, which is those essential fatty acids. And you get, I know you had another speaker on this too, antioxidants and coenzymes, okay? So let's go through each one. So with fiber, many don't realize that fiber is great for those neurotransmitters, right? So fiber actually promotes neurotransmitters, so it's great. And with this diet, you're gonna get, I shouldn't even say diet, it's a lifestyle. You're gonna get tons of fiber. And that's one thing, the average American now is getting about maybe 15 to 20 grams of fiber a day, where it's recommended they get 35 to 40. Okay? With most plant-based diets, you're going to get 50 to 65 grams of fiber a day. So we always think of fiber as like, hey, take that Metamucil and you're going to go regularly. But now in the last 10 years, we've learned so much more about fiber. It does so much more, to the point where, you know, we say there's essential amino acids or essential fatty acids. I call fiber the essential carbohydrate because it even affects your brain chemistry. So that's one amazing thing about fiber. The next thing, so fiber helps in your gut. And the example I always give is that our gut and our brain are connected. And if you think back, I know this is very tiny, but if you look at a little embryo, a little fetus, what is it? It's a big belly and a big head, right? So literally there, the gut and the brain are connected. And over time, we just kind of separate it a little bit. But those connections, so basically what's called the vagus nerve, is literally what connects your stomach to your brain, and they communicate. So with this fiber, it promotes good bacteria in your gut. We're talking everything from the mouth to the very end, and it inhibits the bad bacteria. So when this happens, the fiber is actually promoting better communication in a variety of ways. So those neurotransmitters, and in Parkinson's, of course, it all comes down to the neurotransmitters, right? So when we get this healthy balance of fiber in our diet, it's not just being regular, which is great, because it does help with that as well, but that's not just it. It even goes to how your gut and your brain communicate and how well they communicate. Okay. So this goes now to omega-3s. So think of omega-3s as the insulation of this communication. So every cell in your body has a cell membrane, and we think of it like a coating, a capsule, like insulation, right? Would you, if this wire didn't have rubber around it, would you go and touch it? Probably not. You'd get electrocuted. So omega-3 is like this great and durable coating around the wires. So without omega-3s, we kind of lose that coating. It's kind of, you might get a little short-circuiting, and your neurons are not going to communicate as well. Does that kind of make sense? So you are going to get other fats from like grains and you know, even some animal products. You mainly get saturated fat, but they're not omega-3s. It's very different, very different. And so omega-3s, you're going to find them in things like walnuts and chia seed, and you will find them in fish. But what I say with fish is that you got to think of what are the fish eating. So what do you think, what do fish eat? Algae? I heard someone say algae. Right, and sometimes other fish, but usually the fish in the middle are eating algae and plankton. And what are those? Those are phytoplant nutrients. So, and they're rich in omega-3s. So what makes a healthy salmon have all that omega-3 is what it eats. And what it eats is plants. So I always say a really good insurance policy too, when you're talking about omega-3s, is taking an algae oil supplement. That's so great. It gives you wonderful amount of omega-3s, and that's in addition to, let's say if you eat walnuts or chia seeds, and even leafy greens will give you some omega-3s as well. So it's not just, you don't just have to binge on salmon or other fish to get your omega-3s. So we'll get into coenzymes. Can everyone read this? We're going to be tested on this, okay? You guys got this? You wrote it all down? Okay, perfect. This is like probably, I mean, a minute fraction of the chemical reactions that go on in your body probably in this last second, right? So me talking and moving and putting this presentation together and thinking about my clicker and, you know, you name it, all these chemical reactions are going on. And all these chemical reactions, that's where antioxidants and coenzymes come in. Think of it like an engine, right? You're working an engine really hard, and that's why your oil gets black with soot and all that combustion. so you need to change your oil. So when you eat plant foods, you're getting not only the nutrients we know, right, like protein and fiber, carbohydrates, you're getting all these other little nutrients, phytonutrients and antioxidants that help keep your machines running nice and clean. So with a steak, and again, I'm not trying to put meat as the bad guy, but this is kind of the reality, you know, with a steak or a piece of chicken, you're really not getting phytonutrients or antioxidants. You're going to get amino acids. But with, like, say, black beans or red lentils, you're going to get phytonutrients and protein and vitamins and minerals. So you're going to get a more complete food, a more whole food. And this is a close-up of the blood-brain barrier. Have you guys heard of that before? Blood-brain barrier? That's what protects your brain, right? Because your brain likes your blood, but there might be things in your blood that will hurt your brain. So there's this barrier, just like when a mother is pregnant and it kind of has the barrier to keep the placenta and the baby healthy. So we have that in our brain too. And there's constant reactions going on. So just in that other example with all those other chemical reactions, just in our blood-brain barrier alone, you have a number of chemical reactions going on. So those, again, antioxidants and phytonutrients are so important for that as well. Let's see. So again, I wanted to touch on the amino acid part, right? So how many of you think, like, or have heard this, if you are plant-based, or maybe some of you are vegetarian, or maybe some of you aren't, but the question I get is, well, where do you get your protein? If you don't eat meat, because I don't eat meat or fish or dairy or anything like that, where do I get my protein? Well, again, it all comes down to amino acids. Think of it like oxygen. Amino acids are everywhere. They're in broccoli, they're in fruit, they're in rice, they're everywhere. So really, it's almost impossible to be protein deficient unless you were a fruitarian, meaning you only ate fruit. Then maybe I'll worry about you a little bit. But it's quite implausible and almost impossible to be lacking in protein, especially in our society. So the whole food plant-based diet, you know, or lifestyle, what does it prevent? What don't you want? So you get or you don't get the unwanted fats. So how many of you have heard of saturated fat? Saturated fat, right? Or you've heard of like LDL. Your doctor has told you like, oh, your LDL is a little high. Uh-oh. So that's basically fat that can clog your arteries, right? You always hear that. You worry about your heart and your arteries. Well, I always like to point out your spinal cord. And all throughout your spinal cord, you have tons of little capillaries and arteries. And so usually the first sign that your arteries are in danger or being kind of clogged or the plaque is building up is lower back pain or sciatic nerve pain. So those are usually like the canaries in the coal mine. Or for men, unfortunately, erectile dysfunction. Because we got to think about all the smaller arteries and capillaries, and they're all throughout our spine. And so you might even get organ pain or something with migraine headaches. Because again, this saturated fat builds up on the walls of all those little arteries and all those little capillaries as well. So that's a big thing we kind of overlook. We focus on the big arteries next to our heart, but we got all these other little blood-carrying vessels in our body that get clogged up too as well. So with here too, you get unwanted protein, heavy metals, environmental toxins, neurotoxins, excitotoxins. You guys know all about that, right? Right? No? Okay, we'll go over it. Don't worry. Again, going back to the blood-brain barrier. So again, we have, those are all blood vessels. Those all carry and transfer blood. If we're having too much saturated fat, and saturated fat mainly comes from animal products, you will find plant saturated fat in coconut, but that's about it for the most part. So But what this does is, again, we got to think about the blood-brain barrier, our spinal cord, all those other places where we carry, little transports of blood, and we have those little blood vessels, and those can get clogged as well. And when that happens, you get less oxygen, you get less nutrition, and cells start to die if they don't get enough of that. So this goes back to environmental toxins. So when you're on a more whole food, plant-based diet, keep in mind, these are the things you're avoiding. So how many of you have heard of maybe your niece or granddaughter or daughter had a baby, right? And how many of you have heard that pregnant women should avoid sushi or not eat tuna too much, or definitely don't eat like shark or swordfish, those big animals, right? Have any of you know why? Or have thought of why? Why do we do that?
Mercury poisoning.
Mercury poisoning, right? Because of high levels of mercury. And mercury is a heavy metal, and it's usually, there's some natural sources of mercury, but for the most part, it's the Industrial Revolution, right? Manufacturing, and it kind of goes in our streams and our water, and there's heavy metals. So the idea that, little animals get eaten by the slightly bigger animals, that get eaten by the slightly bigger animals, and then the bigger animals eat those. So what this is called, the fancy word for this is called bioaccumulation. And so what this means is the bigger the animal you eat, the more toxins it'll likely have. And so this is part 2 to where heart disease comes from, or why you get that buildup of the fat in your arteries. It's not just the fat. So when you get this environmental toxins, you get inflammation. We all know that word, right? Inflammation. Inflammation can come from stress too, from your wife nagging you at home. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it can come from family and work and things like that. So you can get stress, but it also comes from the environment. And this is one big way, right? So the bigger the animal you eat, the more toxins you get, the more inflammation. And it puts you at risk for that plaque buildup, for sometimes it manifests as high blood sugar, headaches, joint pain, you name it. It just depends on your genetics and other factors. So if this is true for seafood, and we tell our pregnant women, but yet we don't really hear about it for land animals, but it's the same. So if you're eating a big cow or a big pig or you name it, whatever big animal, you can be sure that they have bioaccumulation of toxins. And so when you eat them, you raise your inflammation. Okay? Does that make any questions on that? Okay. Question? Yeah.
Don't cows eat grass?
Right.
And so where does the bioaccumulation come from grass and grains?
So we'll touch on that too, but I'm very glad you brought that up. I will say this right now, and we'll hopefully get to it in a little more depth too, is that cows in America, for the most part, do not eat grass. So they do not eat grass. So the FDA allows cows and pigs to eat aquatic feces, other dead animals, and they eat genetically modified soy. So soy is not a part of a cow's natural diet. Just like you said, sir, which is exactly right, cows should eat grass and cloves and herbs and other plant matter if they were grazing. But has anyone ever seen where we raise cows in America? No, if you drive up through Bakersfield or up through the middle of California, they're called CAFOs, concentrating animal feeding operations. And so they keep them in big lots all huddled together, and there's dirt. There's no grass anywhere in sight. And so if we had cows that grazed and ate grass, that's great. That's a grass-fed organic cow. That's probably going to be a lot better than what you buy on sale or anywhere else. So things have changed a lot in the last 50 and even 100 years from how we raise animals. I can tell you that for sure. Because now, whatever's on sale at Stater Brothers or that chuck ribeye that's $1.99 a pound or $2.99 a pound, they're definitely not fed grass. And they are lacking all that nutrition that comes from grass. Another thing too is the FDA allows tumors in these animals. So if we're processing a cow and it has a tumor, number one, it usually gets overlooked, so we just process that tumor in the food. Or two, we can cut it out and then continue to process the animal. So much of the time, we're eating a diseased animal of some sort, whether it has some type of GI disease, cancer, or even autoimmune disease in a lot of our big animals. And that's because of the environment we keep them in.
Have to change the Memorial Day menu.
Right. Happy barbecuing weekend. No.
Also, too, when you bring up GMOs, I thought it was really interesting. I watched a video about GMO, and GMO isn't necessarily the problem. Like seedless watermelons are GMO, but the reason that they do GMO for many things, like especially soy, is so that they can use more pesticides on those plants. So in that case, like that means the cows are eating a lot more pesticide covered. So that's where that toxin buildup is, right? Is like
yeah. So the rabbit hole can get very deep right now. So that's where, yes, that's why in our practice we look at the big picture here. We look at environmental factors because the reality is our food is sprayed with herbicides and pesticides, and even the Michael J. Fox Foundation and many trustworthy foundations have considered that in their research, where they say, especially people with Parkinson's disease needs to avoid all and any herbicides and pesticide exposure. And this goes to what's in our food, because we have been finding pesticide residue in our food at alarming rates lately. And you can be sure it's in our animals. And don't worry, I'm going to get a lot more positive at the end. I know it's kind of doom and gloom right now, but this is kind of the reality we're in. And that's why I love giving these talks, because it kind of, a lot of you are falling asleep and now a lot of you are awake. Okay, it's kind of like wake up time. It's like, what did he just say? And it's true, and don't take my word for it. Definitely, you can look it up yourself. But that's why, but if a lot of us know about this, if we can then educate our grandchildren, our children, that's how things change. If we don't get educated, things are not going to change. So we can definitely change it. It's just kind of knowing about it. And then the biggest thing we can do is, one, tell other people, but is also vote with our dollar, right? You vote every day with what you choose to buy and purchase. Whatever you buy and purchase, you support. And so I don't like to support this, and that's one of the reasons I went more plants. I eat more plants. Those are the safer bet, right? So yeah, we'll touch more on pesticide and herbicide, but that's a little preview, I guess.
Okay, then for organic, we know that they grow the crops on the same fields all the time. So even organic, are they using soil that's been depleted of any nutrition?
So
how do we know that?
Right, so organic, so for example, the USDA regulates organic. And lately in the news, though, there's been some fraud. But how do we find out there's fraud? Well, there's third-party watchdog groups like the Organic Institute and the Cornucopia Institute. So there are institutes that watchdog our own government to make sure things are running smoothly. So with organic, for the most part, you are getting less herbicide, less pesticide. You're getting crops that are rotated. You're getting crops that are grown together, which is what's called permaculture. So that's where the plants feed off each other and help each other. So it's like that symbiotic relationship, as opposed to like, let's just dump a bunch of fertilizer and keep rotating and growing on the same land. And you're talking about soil depletion. So yeah, for the most part, if you invest in organic, you are getting a better product. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better, definitely. But as we educate ourselves, as we choose better, it can get better. There are much better ways. Unfortunately, fertilizer and herbicides and pesticides are multi-billion-dollar industry. And so a lot of people don't want us to let go of these things, even though we should. So I will say that.
Question.
Yes.
You did say that most of the plants, most of the vegetables we get in the supermarkets are contaminated.
Yeah, if they don't say organic, they are contaminated. So I mean, I highly recommend that you wash your fruits and vegetables extremely well. And one thing I can give you, and even Claire can send out the link, but if you want to sign up with our sign-in sheet and everything, is we can give you links to groups that do the work for you, where they share with you what are the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. So that means the most clean fruits and vegetables that you maybe don't have to get organic, and the dirty dozen that you should probably definitely get organic because they spray heavy amounts of pesticide and herbicide. So there's things like that too. But again, I'd probably say what I always recommend to my patients is there's definitely a local farmer's market by you, or there's a CSA box that they'll deliver to your doorstep. And when you factor in the cost of that, you get to know your farmer, you're getting quality product that's local, that's really a lot of times the farmers at the farmer's market use no herbicides and pesticides, and they believe in that permaculture model. So that's, I mean, great. If you can do that, great. And I can help you get those resources too if you like, definitely. So and if you have questions, we'll get into, I have a whole section on that too, the organic as well. But getting back to I don't want to just focus again on meat. It's also, there's a lot more vegan products. There's the hot dogs and the burgers and the cheeses that are all vegan, and that's still processed food. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you have high cholesterol or erectile dysfunction or any type of heart disease or even diabetes, doing some of these initially might be good, but I don't want you to get the idea that I'm saying all vegan products or plant-based products are healthy. They're not. So again, it goes back to whole food, plant-based. So again, going more for the whole food, not necessarily even the processed vegan food, because it's very similar to processed fast food as well in a lot of ways. Okay, so that's what a whole food plant-based diet can kind of prevent these things. Again, so the unwanted fats, unwanted proteins, the like heavy metals and environmental toxins. And with this last point too, I didn't touch on, so there's things called neurotoxins and excitotoxins. So MSG has been very debatable. And I, for one, do believe it is what's called an excitotoxin, where too much MSG, it overstimulates certain neurons in your brain and can kill them. And so there's a lot of things in food where they do it for flavor, they do it to get you wanting to eat and eat and eat. If you ever feel like you eat a chip and you just can't stop eating, look at the ingredients, because they disguise things as natural flavors and yeah, MSG, where it's like, oh, that's a nice looking acronym, I don't know what it is. You know, you're not really aware of what's in your food. And so they can be excitotoxins or neurotoxic to your body, definitely. Okay, so going back to just kind of everyday things and why. So why whole food plant-based and not vegan? So again, when you're eating whole plants, as opposed to even processed vegan food or any processed food, it starts in your mouth. Just the act of chewing more can help you lower your body weight. Did you guys know that? Yeah, so, and I mean, it can even help with if you guys are getting any bloating or digestive issues. It usually starts with, how am I chewing? Or what am I chewing? If foods are just melting in your mouth right when you put it in, that's kind of a red flag that there's really no fiber in it. So whether it's chocolate or like a Ritz cracker, sorry to throw Ritz under the bus, but when you put a Ritz cracker in your mouth, it just dissolves. It's like it was never there, right? Before you can even think, where'd my cracker go? And it's gone. So that's kind of a sign that there's no fiber in that product, because fiber you need to chew. So, and chewing is normal. Chewing is great. It tells your body release hormones, it gets your stomach ready, helps you feel more full. So just the act of chewing is great. Chew, and make sure you chew, and get foods that are chewy. So, and with the stomach too. So again, your stomach needs fiber. So when it doesn't get fiber, again, we're throwing off the bacteria. And also your stomach doesn't really know it's full, because no one ever says, I can't stop eating these Brussels sprouts, right? Who's said that? Anyone? Anyone? Maybe? Yeah, some pretty good Brussels sprouts, but you need a little help, like some salt and some olive oil. But like plain Brussels sprouts, right? But if you had a bag of Keebler cookies or a pint of ice cream, that thing is gone. Easy, right? So that's where your fiber needs food, or your stomach needs food, but it needs that fiber food so it can feel full, so it knows when to stop eating, right? And then over here, that picture of the bacteria. So when you're choosing these more fiber-rich foods, you're helping those good bacteria. You're helping the good guys win the fight. Because trust me, there's a war going on in your stomach, in your small intestine, in your colon, and it's a war between trillions of bacteria. Okay? It's just like the Serengeti down there. Okay? Imagine that. It's true. And there are more of those little guys than all the cells in your body. And so feeding the right bacteria or the right microorganisms is very important. And choosing the natural plant foods, the whole foods, beans, legumes, wild rice, quinoa, sweet potato, broccoli, leafy greens, nuts and seeds, apricots and oranges. So those are all plant foods. Those are all delicious foods. Eat more of those foods, you're feeding your healthy microorganisms, right? So,
I have a question for you.
Sure, yeah.
When you juice, and you juice your greens,
Right,
sometimes when you eat your greens and that fiber that you're talking about
right,
causes you to bloat.
right.
So I juice my greens and I try to get in as much greens as I can, but that also, when you're talking about the amount of fiber that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably good for you, but it feels like a turkey dinner after you've taken in all that fiber.
Right.
How does your body get used to that? Because if I can't eat it, I'll juice it.
Okay. So did you guys, everyone hear that? So he's talking about juicing and how that's maybe an approach to kind of curb the bloating from fiber. So there's a couple things here. So one, for the most part, I usually recommend juicing. And for the most part, I don't recommend juicing. If you juice, it only should be greens. We're talking like wheatgrass, kale, the yummy juice, right? Who didn't grow up drinking kale juice in the morning? No one did, no. So that's only juice I would say you should have. As far as any type of fruits or even carrots or anything else, do that in a smoothie. But then getting to the fiber issue, if you feel like when you have a lot of fiber you bloat, that's where you need to talk to a dietitian or a GI specialist that knows of your condition if you have Parkinson's. And so there's a lot of underlying issues. And so that's where there are modifications to this plant-based diet. There's something called FODMAPs. There's something called the autoimmune diet. There's modifications. There's something if you have SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So sometimes bacteria gets in places it's not supposed to be. And so when you eat that broccoli or you leave the peel on XYZ fruit and eat it, you get this extreme bloating. It's not so much the food's fault. It's just maybe in the past years, the war in your belly has gotten messy and it's spilled over into places it's not supposed to be. So there's a number of reasons why that is.
And also, like with fiber, there's a transition, right? So if you're
Yeah.
really eating more processed foods and animal products, it's not like you can do a cold turkey
Right.
switch. That it'll take a lot for your body to be able to digest that. So you kind of have to ease into it to
Right.
not experience too much bloating or gas or changes in your digestion, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah, and
can't
that's
necessarily say, okay, I know now I went from eating 10 grams of fiber per day, now I'm going to try to get 40.
Right.
And your body be like, whoa.
Yeah,
that would
then-
be hard on it too. So that's what, like, or every other day, if you eat more plants, more animal back and forth, that could also potentially be hard on
Exactly.
your body because it's just not used to digesting that type of food, right?
Right, exactly. So yeah, you got to see where you are in your everyday eating lifestyle. So yeah, if you're coming from like, I have 10 grams of fiber a day, yeah, it's transition. It's baby steps sometimes. Because again, you need time for your bacteria, and this goes even into your stomach acid and different, and this even goes into medications. if you're on proton pump inhibitors, if you're on certain GI medications, they can affect the way you digest food. So that's where, I mean, it gets kind of complicated. And so that's where I would recommend you see a dietitian to kind of help you through that complication. But for the most part, yeah, you do need kind of a transition phase, and you do it little by little. And don't just kind of get kale and spinach and carrot and make a big smoothie and chug that thing when you've never done that before. Because yeah, you might not have a bad day, or you might have a bad day, and depending on other medication, it might really make you have a bad day. So yeah, you have to be careful. But for the most part, you know, and going back to how it helps, though, again, taking all those cautions in mind, what we do find, though, is that it also helps us decrease our blood sugar and control our blood sugar. And whether you're diabetic or not, this is vital. Because going back to how our spinal cord and we have all those blood vessels, again, if we have too much sugar in our blood, I know a lot of us worry about gaining weight. That's always the first, like, I'm gonna get fat. It's like, no, it's much more than that. Your blood is gonna lack oxygen. Your different parts of your body is gonna lack nutrition. Because think of blood as a very liquid and fast substance. It moves very fast. When you have high blood sugar, it becomes maple syrup. It goes very slow. And that's why if after you have like a heavy meal or a very sweet dessert, you want to take a nap, that's your body trying to cope with all that sugar, right? So eating more whole plant foods helps prevent that. It's a time release effect into your bloodstream as opposed to a big spike and everybody's like, I got so much sugar, and you want to take a nap so it can process it all. So it's a big difference. And so, and even with this fiber, it helps even bind extra cholesterol in your body. And how does that relate to blood sugar? Well, even fat from animals can cause insulin resistance. So that's another way that you can develop pre-diabetes or diabetes, or just even have high blood sugar out of nowhere. Like, why am I getting high blood sugar? Well, even animal fat can cause that. Even if you don't eat croissants or white rice, or you don't eat sweets or ice cream, but if you have a lot of animal fat, that can also cause high blood sugar as well. And a lot of times we don't hear that, right? When you go, if you are having issues with high blood sugar, you go into the doctor, they say, okay, avoid the carbs and do more protein. And that means steaks and eggs and, you know, what else? Cheese. Do a nice string cheese and a big, you know, cheese on your, you know, whatever, on your chicken. I had people do it where they just put cheese on their chicken and then have a side of ham, and that's their meal, and that's great. High protein, low carb. But you're still at risk for high blood sugar. And now some heart disease maybe. So it all connects, definitely. So again, going back to, I hope I zoomed in. Oh yeah, I did. Perfect. So this is a great look at what 500 calories looks like. So towards the left, you have 500 calories of oil. The next one is 500 calories of cheese. The next one is 500 calories of meat. Next, potatoes, rice, and beans. And then last, fruits and veggies. So you see the difference in 500 calories of these different foods. So thinking of it of a calorie perspective, you know, I always say don't really worry about calories, worry about the ingredients. If you look at a product, you want to read the ingredients. Because if you're getting ingredients like, sorry, let me close this. If you're getting more natural ingredients, you know, whole beans, or if it's a bar where you're getting dates and nuts and seeds, it's going to fill your stomach a lot more than any type of oil or cheese or meat. And so you're going to feel a lot more full with less calories overall. Does that make sense? Okay. So I want to see what questions do you have?
Do you believe in probiotic, taking a probiotic?
Yeah, so probiotic is great, and I usually recommend probiotics to my patients. However, I first recommend prebiotics, which is what? So think of prebiotics as the soil and probiotics as the seed. If you don't have the soil, are you going to plant your seeds? No, right? Any gardeners? I love gardening. Who loves gardening? All right. So the idea, what are prebiotics? Prebiotics are all those fibrous foods I mentioned. Some more than others, but garlic and artichoke and any fiber-rich food is a prebiotic. So by having that fiber there, when you do take a probiotic, or you do eat some yogurt, or you drink kombucha, or you have those foods with other probiotics, it's like planting a seed in that soil and then they grow and flourish. You're talking about that same example of getting that good army back up. So those probiotics are part of that good army, but you got to have that fiber there or they're not going to survive. You take a supplement, and it might be an expensive supplement, and then you're not eating fiber, it's just going to go right out. And you're just going to be wasting that supplement. Yeah. So I want to kind of put this into examples, right? So what I always tell my patients as well is whatever food you like to eat, you can continue to eat with a whole food plant-based diet. So what do I mean? Well, I'll show you. Yeah, let me show you this. So a taco, right? And this is a fried shell. Maybe you go to an authentic Mexican and it's a lard. They fry it in some lard. And then on the inside, you get some like barbacoa where it's all shredded and fatty and yummy. And you put a lot of cheese and maybe sour cream. And that's a great taco, right? Yeah, maybe for your taste buds, but not for your body, right? But on the flip side, you can get, let's say, an Ezekiel sprouted tortilla or even a corn tortilla. And, you put your whole black beans. You saute your tomatoes and spinach and mushroom with some olive oil, a little bit of salt, maybe some garlic. You do like fresh cilantro with guacamole and some diced onion with a squirt of lime. Does that not also sound tasty? Right. And so what you're doing is you're still getting lots of food. And think back to that picture of the stomach full of food, but you're leaving out all those unwanted things that we talked about. And you're still getting tons of fiber, lots of nutrition. This is one with the kind of the plant-based cheese on it. And again, when you're starting out, I used plant-based cheese a lot when I first transitioned, when I got rid of cheese from my diet. Another thing they don't tell you about cheese is one thing in cheese is it has a lot of casein protein. And a byproduct of that digestion is what's called casomorphins. Anyone know what casomorphins are? So what's at the end of casomorphin? Morphine. So it's a byproduct that's very similar to morphine. And it's highly addictive. And so that's one of the byproducts that we're guessing causes cheese addiction. Because cheese addiction is very real. And some studies have even showed it's as addictive or even 2 times more addictive than cocaine. Cheese. And when you think of cheese, what we're doing is we're taking the breast milk of a cow, we're getting all the fat together, and we're dumping loads of salt, and we got a nice brick of cheese. And so you don't find that in nature, really, right? You don't go to the cheese tree or and pick some cheese and eat it. It's also a processed food. And so with that, it becomes addictive. Just in that example of the cocoa plant to cocaine to crack. Again, as we process our foods more and more, the more addictive it gets. So this is the next one. What about, a question?
Can you give us an example of a plant-based cheese?
Yeah, so there's one called Daiya cheese, D-A-I-Y-A, and it's great. They have mozzarella. One of my favorites is Myokos, M-Y-O-K-O-S, I believe.
You can send out this stuff.
Yeah, and I could send out this stuff. Totally. And this is on my website too, but we could send you all these links. And so these cheeses are nut-based, and a lot of times you're finding these things at Albertsons. You're finding them at Sprouts, definitely. Trader Joe's has a lot now. I mean, but they're even popping up a lot of organic and plant-based at Target. You know, Costco. I'm serious.
Yeah, Costco has a lot of.
Costco, but even Target too. You have a.
Yeah, nice.
Though, what was that?
Some cultures, they eat cheese all the time, like plants.
Right.
Eggs.
Right. Aged cheese.
Is that better or worse?
So a lot of there's so many factors to that, because let's say a place like France or other European countries where they walk a lot, where their cows are in the pasture actually eating grass. So it really depends on even the source. So there is better cheeses than others, and for the most part, if you like to eat cheese, I usually recommend organic grass-fed cheese. That's going to help a lot. You know, but still, even if it's an organic grass-fed animal, you're not going to know if it got into a patch of bad food or has been drinking bad water, and there's still that bioaccumulation. It's still going to be there, but you can decrease it, definitely. So in that scenario, yeah, if you got like an aged cheese that was a grass-fed, it's going to be better. How much better, I can't tell you. But you might even feel it. You might even feel it. But it probably will still be addictive because it's still going to have those casein and those casomorphins. Yeah. Another question? Okay. So like a shredded beef barbecue burger, which some of you might eat, or like a sloppy Joe type of burger, right? Where it's like nice shredded beef with sweet barbecue sauce, and you know there's a lot of added sugar in there, on a nice white bun, nice and processed. Take a bite. But on the flip side too, how many of you heard of jackfruit? Very cool, yep, jackfruit. So this is a fruit that grows like a weed everywhere in the Pacific Islands, like Philippines and even Thailand, stuff like that. And the nutrition content is off the charts. I mean, it gives you everything.
What's it called?
Jackfruit. And so if you go to places like 99 Ranch or H Mart, or I don't know what other, like kind of more the Asian markets, you'll find big jackfruit there. And you can get them young, and you can make this yourself. You shred it, and you can saute it and make it savory and add barbecue and make it nice and savory, almost like a pulled pork or like a shredded chicken. It's delicious. You can also find it canned. Nice young jackfruit, you just get it canned and just do it out of the can as well.
And it needs to be young, not ripe.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of flavor to it itself, so that's when you can,
Can mold it.
Or soak it, whatever that's.
Yeah, marinate.
If it's ripe, then it's sweet and it's a fruit, which is also delicious. But
Right.
then it doesn't work as well for this kind of
Right.
thing.
And so this, you can tell it's more of a whole grain bun, maybe a sprouted grain, which there's a lot of now. You can add your lettuce and tomato. You can make a sauce that's a plant-based creamy sauce, and you don't have to use animal products. However you like this burger, you can make it. And it's a great, again, you're still eating these delicious flavors and these foods, but with more nutrition and less of the harmful things in it.
Do you take in any kimchi or sauerkraut?
Yeah, kimchi and sauerkraut are great. Yep. So we're talking about a natural source of probiotics is kimchi and sauerkraut. They'll give you, it's a aged, it's a fermented food, and it has probiotics. So what about baked potato? Loves a baked potato. Sour cream and butter and maybe some bacon bits. Yum. What about a baked Mediterranean sweet potato? So you could do a sweet potato nice and baked. You can maybe do a yummy tahini dressing over chickpeas and some tomatoes and just get all those yummy flavors, little cumin, paprika, great flavors. And maybe you guys have never tried that before, and you should. I have this story of when I went to a cabin with friends, and we were in charge of cooking for one of the meals. And we were with another person who was like, I'm gonna bring the chicken, and we're like, okay, we're gonna do the kind of the veggie side, right? So we had the sweet potatoes, and we had all the beans, and we're gonna do like a build your own baked sweet potato. And then the person who was bringing the chicken didn't show up. And we're like, uh-oh, like here we are, everyone knows we're like the vegans, right? And here we are forcing our veganism onto everyone. And so we were kind of scared, like we didn't know how people were going to react, but they loved the baked sweet potato, right? They started putting beans and broccoli. We sauteed like broccoli and spinach and onions and got them all glazed and yummy. Put it all over the sweet potato. We put like salsa, we had these some plant-based cream sauces that are made from like cashew. Put it all over the sweet potato. Everyone loved it. Still to this day, my friends are like, I make that like once a week now, and I love it. And they didn't even miss the chicken. So it's about trying new things. It's about stepping out of your comfort zone sometimes, but take it at your own pace. Everyone's different. What about mac and cheese? And you know, I probably didn't pick the best example. I keep forgetting to kind of, there's other mac and cheeses that you can get closer, like a plant-based version that's a little bit closer. But, you know, another pasta alternative is a zoodle, a zucchini noodle. So you can get a spiral, or you could just kind of shred it yourself and do a zucchini noodle with your marinara sauce and make a pasta. So this is great for diabetics as well, but it's great for anyone. We do this at least like once a month, at least. And my daughter loves it. So we do our own pasta sauce with tons of veggies. We even do more zucchini and broccoli in the sauce itself, and then have it with the zucchini noodles. And then I'll make sometimes a garlic toast. So I use a sprouted grain bread with some garlic spread on it, and I toast it in the oven. My daughter loves it. And you don't really miss much. You get all those great flavors.
What do you use in place of butter for the garlic?
So the garlic spread. So there's this great, and then we're gonna give you guys all these products, but there's one that's already made, and it's kind of it's an olive oil, garlic, lemon, salt, and they like just mix it so it gets creamy and smooth, and you spread that on your sandwiches or your toast, and it's amazing. And you can even put your own like herbs like rosemary and thyme on it, and it's off the chart. You don't even miss butter. And garlic, talk about garlic, it's a prebiotic. It's promoting those healthy bacteria. You ever?
This question, in the Mediterranean, they use algae, which means garlic and oil.
Yeah.
You can press the garlic with your oil, which matching, and then add a little bit of salt,
Mm-hmm.
and olive oil, and you stir it slowly, and it becomes a mayonnaise.
Right.
It's very, very strong. It has garlic and oil and salt.
Garlic, oil, and salt. So that's kind of the same idea. So in the Mediterranean region, they kind of use that. I think that's kind of where this spread kind of came from. And now I use it almost on everything. It's delicious.
Does it make what kind of oil?
What kind of oil?
Yeah, they make a different.
I mean, with oil, think of oil as a processed food as well. So even with oil, I still use a little bit of oil, but again, I use very little. So I'll use an avocado oil or an olive oil, but I treat that like a processed food because it is. Because the whole food version of that is an olive. Of avocado oil, it's an avocado. So still, we're processing those oils, so you don't want to use oil a lot. And that's why I say even if you're doing a whole food plant-based diet, there's really no deep frying.
Where do you get your
Sorry.
avocado oil?
It's everywhere now. I mean, it's like Sprouts, Whole Foods. I mean, it's...
Because olive oil, there's really only two real companies out there that make olive oil. The rest of them, and one of them is from Costco, the
Yeah.
Brooklyn brand.
Yeah.
And there's only one other one. I forget the name of the other one. The rest of them are all, they say they're olive oil, but
They're kind of mixed, or they're not
but
true.
they have more of a blend of other things in there, but the FDA lets them.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of getting into like nitty-gritty details. I mean, overall, kind of minimize your oil use, but if you do, olive oil is good. Avocado oil. Avocado oil should have a green color. If you buy avocado oil and it's not a greenish color, you probably don't have avocado oil, or you have very little in there. So that's one thing I know about avocado oil. So there's a handout I can send you all, and I brought some copies today too, but it's Healthy Eating Daily. So we just kind of outline some tips, because again, I don't want you all to think that, you know, this type of lifestyle is where I have to cook every day from scratch, because it's not. And that's impossible. I don't do that either. So it's going to be a mixture of when you eat out, when you are doing frozen foods when you're cooking at home, and even if you want to do like a meal delivery service. There are a lot of options out there. I know this is a lot of words, but I'll send you a copy of this as well. But it kind of goes into like tips. So if you're eating at home, eat all of the colors, keep the skins on, buy organic if you can, and no portion control when you're really eating whole foods. You know, because that fiber is going to fill you up. Again, it's that example of how many Brussels sprouts can you eat? How many whole apples can you really eat? You know, I think at 3 apples, I'd be almost wanting to throw up, I think. You know, so that fiber is there for a reason. So it's when you take it out, then the food can become dangerous, right? So that's the idea. But I will give you guys this handout as well. But I just wanted to show you an example. Some other tips. How am I?
Oh, you're doing
okay.
great.
Okay.
It's fun.
Perfect. Some other tips. So like with batch cooking. So a lot of times what we do in our home is we do batch cooking. So I'll make a big thing of black beans. And so what I'll do is I'll make, probably like 4 cups or more of dried black beans, and that'll last us the whole week. And out of there, I'll do them whole, and then maybe I'll throw in some garlic and salt and do a puree that we can use as a dip for veggies, or we can throw it in like a whole grain tortilla and wrap a black bean wrap. So just getting creative. You know, I also do a big batch of, and sometimes in the morning, I'll throw quinoa in the oven and make a quinoa bar, and I'll throw in raisins and some dates and bake it with banana and make like almost a quinoa bar or cookie. Or then I'll do quinoa as dinner with the black beans I made, or with like roasted potato and mushroom and chickpeas over the bed of quinoa. So it's just kind of playing with different recipes, but it's knowing what you like. I like having beans around, so I make a lot of beans and have them around for me to play with and have at my convenience. That way it's not like every day I'm not having to cook beans. Every day I have to cook a quinoa or wild rice or something. You make it maybe on a Sunday and it'll last you the whole week. That type of thing.
Like black beans is your favorite?
I do all kinds of beans. I love beans. Kidney beans, black beans, pinto beans, chickpeas. I love it all. Lentils, eat them all. Again, those are whole foods. So yeah, so remember, if it comes in a can, read the ingredients. So yeah, read those ingredients and you tell me. But again, and then even vegetables too. So if you have a crock pot or a steam cooker and you just throw in a bunch of veggies and some vegetable broth and your herbs and seasoning and make a soup. Make a big thing of soup and you can have it for the whole week. So little tips like that you can do, and you don't have to be cooking every single day. Snacking. I definitely encourage snacking because starvation equals bad choices, right? If you let yourself get starving, if that's in your mind, like, I'm starving, you're probably going to make a bad choice any second. The moment a croissant or a bagel or a donut comes into your view, it's gone and it's melted into your mouth, right? So I know that's how I am. So I definitely snacked before I got here. My mind is always revolving around food. And that's why, because I love food, I'm in this profession, but I urge you to kind of be that way too, where you have snacks in your purse. You have, good snacks at home, because, we all get busy. We get busy. And even if we're retired, I have patients who are retired, like, I'm busier now than ever. And it's like, I get it. You're volunteering, you're with the grandkids, or you're doing this and going from there. And your daughter needs help, your son needs help, this is happening. We get busy. So, having those go-to snacks that hey, these are good. These are healthy for me. These are actually going to nurture me instead of take away from me. That's great to have. And that's something I can give you as well. I give you tons of tips on healthy snacks as well. So some examples. Anyone heard of Larabar? Larabars, they're at Trader Joe's. They're also at Target. They're great. Again, when you read those ingredients of a Larabar, you usually see, like, this one's called apple pie. So this one has dates, almonds, cinnamon, I'm trying to think what else. I think cashews, and that's it. So On apples, I didn't say apple. There you go. Thank you. I assumed you knew there were apples in there. No, but so yeah, and that's it. So you're talking about simple ingredients. You're not seeing things there and there like honey or agave or cane sugar. All those are added sugars, right? So when you're not seeing the word sugar or corn syrup or any of those, you're not getting them in there. The sugar's coming from whole fruits or whole foods. Same thing with like bear, like an apple chip. Let's say you want to change the texture up a little bit. You know, have something crunchy to snack on. You're going to a movie. You want to snack in bed or something. Apple chips. You know, on the back it just says Fuji apples, and that's it. They're at Trader Joe's, but they have different brands. So this is one brand. It's called Bear, but Trader Joe's has their own brand. Target has some. Costco has some. Costco sometimes carries the Bear. So I mean, it's just kind of, again, when you buy something, when you buy a product, it's reading those ingredients. It's knowing, what am I eating, right? Question? Plain old popcorn, yeah, popcorn's fine. I mean, me, professionally and personally, I would recommend you do an organic popcorn, just because most corn is genetically modified, but that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, I would say organic popcorn. But even if it's plain organic popcorn with just a little salt or olive oil or something, fine. And so, and this, throwing this in there, but again, so as far as knowing more on snack ideas, and don't worry, we're not, but snack ideas, knowing more on food ideas, recipes. So I have a sign sheet in the back so you can connect with us and learn more, or work with us one-on-one if you like. So I have that information for you. So, anyone want to take a deep breath? Take a deep breath. You want to stretch? Raise your hands up and stretch. Take your jacket off. Get a sip of water. Take a break.
Can you share what a typical breakfast and lunch and dinner would be for you or your family?
Sure. So, typical breakfast. So we're working out a lot now in the morning, so we'll do a smoothie. So the smoothie will be like, we get those nice little bananas, and we love them with like the black seeds in them. They're great. But banana, we do like unsweetened almond milk, and we do frozen blueberries and pineapple, and we'll do some like green chard or spinach, and we blend it all up, and then we either with that we'll make a smoothie bowl, and then we'll put some shredded almonds on it, some maybe chia seed, and maybe more fresh fruit, and that's what my daughter loves to eat. She loves that in the morning, or we'll drink it as a drink. Maybe I'll do like a sprouted grain toast with some sunflower or peanut butter. And that's usually a typical breakfast. And then lunch will be maybe like a wild rice with pinto beans. And either that, we could put it in a tortilla, or we could just have it in the bowl. And we'll do some avocado, maybe sliced cucumber and tomato. And that's like a typical lunch. Typical dinner, we could do a pasta. So if we do a whole grain pasta, or we'll do maybe like a zucchini noodle, or the spaghetti. Do you guys like spaghetti squash? Spaghetti squash, really good. And then, and you know, and again, it sounds like we're cooking a lot, but I buy a red sauce from Costco. And it's a sauce I found with no added sugar, and it's a great sauce. And I just do that over, and I'll just slice up some steamed broccoli, and we do a little nutritional yeast. That's another one maybe you don't know about, but delicious. And maybe that's a dinner. And then we'll maybe do a side salad with that too. So it's just kind of, and then snacks in between, Lara bars, fruit. We do maybe a sprouted cracker with that garlic spread. You know, it kind of just varies, yeah.
Can you comment on, we found a pasta that's very, very high fiber.
Okay.
Called Dreamfields.
Dreamfields, okay.
And, I mean, it's like 4 or 5 times the fiber. Is something like that okay to be made
Like, yeah, it's kind of splitting hairs. I mean, I have to see what's in the ingredient, but I mean, overall, when you're getting that fiber, it does help a lot. So, I mean, even if the food has a lot of fiber, it's going to be great. Now, again, it's kind of splitting hairs, and I have to look in the ingredients because there are cheap forms of fiber. So one is kind of like a psyllium seed husk. That's such a cheap form of fiber. And there's different types of fiber. So that fiber, for the most part, you don't want to take long term because it's very hard on your GI system.
So you just look at the box and see,
It'll
tell you where the fiber
it'll
comes
usually
from?
tell you what, yeah, it'll tell you.
Okay.
It'll tell you, yeah.
And that's kind of the difference of like how processed the food is. Did
Exactly.
they process out all the fiber and then add some fiber in afterwards?
Right.
Or is it less processed in the first place so it still maintains some of that fiber?
Right.
So that's the difference, right? So if it says added fiber, that's not really good because that means
Right.
it didn't come from the whole food. They added some other
Yeah. And
additive.
for a while, and I even have to double check, but they're adding wood shavings into food and calling it fiber. So I mean, that was a practice for a long time, and I think we kind of did away with it. But you'd be surprised. I mean, again, most food companies are trying to make money, and they'll cut corners, and that's why we put addictive things into food to make you eat more, or we put things into food where we'll cut corners. And hey, wood is technically non-toxic and it's somewhat edible. So if we put this much % into it, it's not going to harm you, and they can get away with calling it extra fiber or something. So, you know, but it's being careful.
And like a lot of dried fruits I've seen have added sugar. Like if you
Right.
look at the ingredients, the dried fruit has added
Right.
sugar. And the company, like somebody asked the company why, and they said for weight, because they sell the product by weight. So if they add sugar, it adds weight, and they make more money. So it's not because you need more sugar in a dried
Right.
fruit that's already flavorful, but there's all these different reasons why they're doing what they're doing, and it's our health is not their goal.
Right.
It's
And in that case, it's like a win-win scenario where the sugar makes you probably keep coming back to that brand because you like that sugar fix. And then, yeah, it's helping them with their weight where you think, oh, wow, this is a pound of dried mango when it's really low, but you're getting extra sugar. So that you and then I'll come to you.
Okay, this is a little change in subject, but
Okay.
my understanding is the cells and everything. Where do you get your fat if you're eating
So one source of fat.
avocado?
Right, yeah, so you're gonna get polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat from a host of food. I mean, just think of where we get the oils, olives and avocado and nuts and seeds. So you're getting a variety of fats from all those. When you're talking about your body making cholesterol, that's exactly what it does. Your body can manufacture and recycle cholesterol in the body. So also too, another thing is when you get sunlight and create vitamin D, we're finding that you also create this cholesterol substrate, and that goes back into the body and does amazing things. So I'm even getting away from telling patients to do a vitamin D supplement, and I say go in the sun for 15 minutes. And again, this may cause more questions, but like it depends on other things of like if you have any melanomas or anything like that, or if you're sensitive in some way. But in general, sunlight is amazing, and no supplement can prevent that. But going back to your question is, your body is very capable of getting cholesterol and fats from a plant-based diet and recycling and manufacturing its own. So really, I mean, you're not going to be in a fat deficit whatsoever. Yeah. And then you had a question?
Yeah, you mentioned psyllium husks.
Yeah.
I've been taking that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering what you would recommend, because whenever I've tried something other than that, it didn't do as well as the psyllium husk.
Right.
For some reason.
Well, I would say one big factor in a lifestyle change or a healthy lifestyle is patience. And that's with anything. And I'm not saying you're not patient or anything. I'm just saying this in general. But you impatient guy, this guy, no, I'm just kidding. But with that, it's taking time, you know. So even if you got off your supplement that's a psyllium husk, and even if you did, let's say you did a smoothie with some chard in it. So the money you spend on that fiber supplement, you put it into leafy greens that you have every day. Try that and give it time. Don't give it a week. Give it a month, couple months at least, and see what happens. So it's kind of, there's really no supplement that will replace the fiber naturally found in food, because here's a little secret. The nutrition, whether you want to call it nutritionists or dietitians or the health industry, we know very little about nutrition, right? We've only touched the surface. There's things in foods we have no idea about yet. And that's kind of why I love this profession, because it's like being an explorer. And every day I hear about something new. And it's amazing. So to think we know what's in a broccoli, we really don't. Even in an orange. We always think of vitamin C in an orange, but that's just the surface. You know, we really have not untapped the full potential of food. So if you can go for a more whole food
Flaxseed?
product, flaxseed, chia seed, yeah, getting that fiber, but just fruits and vegetables in general, you're going to get great fiber.
And in smoothies, I've been adding chickpeas because like they don't taste like anything, but in the smoothie then you get like protein and fiber.
Yeah.
And you don't have to add any type of powders or anything.
Mm-hmm. And you had it?
Date and honey and put sugar stuff to food.
Date and honey. So go back to the rule of doing the whole foods. I would do dates over honey. So dates, and if you want to turn it into a syrup, my simple recipe is you boil some water, you put your dates in a bowl and let it soak for maybe a minute, and then you blend it up, or you can even mash it with your fork. And you get a date puree, or if you blend it, you get a nice date syrup. And sometimes I use that as my pancake syrup. I throw that in my baking recipes. And it's so sweet, and you still get all the fiber from the date. It's a great syrup. No, I sound like a cook or a chef, but like I'm really not. But I try and put it out there as much or a lot. So if you sign up for our newsletter, I'm getting better with sharing things and recipes on our website. But that's why I like to come speak, because I try and just share it here as well. Claire and I are thinking of maybe doing some sort of ebook, but it's kind of in the baby phases.
Yeah. And
yeah, I know.
There are options though, so that's also
but yeah,
you can put in
exactly.
So there are like some frozen meals, some delivery services
Right.
that do this type of plant-based meals.
Right.
Even if you have that 2 or 3 nights a week, that would be an option.
Much.
There's a lot of resources out there now that James doesn't have to
Right.
do all of
Way better chefs than I could ever be. Trust me, and they're doing it.
Yeah, I think that we would like to do maybe an ebook or some video, because I'm coming from the perspective of knowing that, let's say you got Parkinson, so I look at a lot of recipes and they'll have like 16 or 20 ingredients, and I'm like, nope, that's not going to happen. So we need recipes that are as simple as possible and don't require like tons of chopping and chopping and cutting things up. I don't know how to do that with Parkinson. Sometimes there's some difficulty with fine motor.
Right.
So we would need things to be simple and healthy. And I think sometimes like the recipes just get pretty fancy. But there definitely are resources like Forks Over Knives. There's a meal delivery called PlantPure that is good. So we'll put that all in the email, so you guys will have those resources.
Yeah, but great. Okay.
We have a favorite fish place across the street, and it's really good food. We usually get the salmon.
Okay.
Am I being silly to, you can have farm or wild?
Yes.
Which one would be the better? Just saying that to you, farm or wild?
Well, wild would be better.
But it has the skin on it, and that was the grossest thing I got.
Well,
I just go, oh my God.
And when you look at the highest concentration of omega-3, it's in the skin. So if you're taking out the skin from your fish, you're throwing away like 30% of the omega-3. You gotta eat the skin. You're eating fish. Just eat the head too. And I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, talk about like scary. Farm fishing, it's pretty scary what those fish eat. Yeah. It's not.
So it's kind of on the same level of like a factory farm cow. They're just eating things they're not normally eating. And also too, we're finding exercise has a lot to do with omega-3 content in fish. And when you're just keeping them in a net in the ocean, where salmon are these amazing travelers and they go thousands and thousands of miles, and they're just not. And so that does something to their composition. And you're actually getting more, they're even finding like bad fats in salmon now as they're being farmed. So it's like when you do that to a wild animal, you disrupt what makes them special. So wild, and if wild is expensive, that means you eat a little less of it. And you do your walnuts and chia seed, and you do algae. You do a nice seaweed salad. Great. You get iodine. No. Okay. You guys got to write this down. This is in Fountain Valley. It's called Aulac. A-U-L-A-C. This is one of the best restaurants I've ever been to in my life. It's Aulac. Yep. And I know we're streaming this. Aulac, hit me up. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great restaurant. And there they have kelp noodle chow mein. And I know it sounds crazy. Okay, maybe crazier to some, but it's delicious. It's delicious. And you're talking about eating kelp. It's a ocean plant food. And that's something I foresee in the next 30 years we're going to be doing a lot more of, maybe in the next 10 years. We're going to be eating a lot more ocean plant foods because they're rich in iodine, and they're rich in omega-3s, and they're rich in protein. It's everything. Again, thinking of what do those little critters eat in the ocean? They're eating plants and phytoplankton. And that's what makes them special. So it's kind of like when you go straight to the source, you're cutting out the middleman, right? Fish are just kind of a middleman to that nutrition. So you can still get that nutrition. Fish are just the kind of the middle salesman, like, hey, eat me. But they have a lot of other toxicities and heavy metals, and more so as we kind of pollute our ocean. And a great segue into the environment matters, right? So how are we polluting the ocean, right? So, but it starts with the individual, because that can sound monumental. I know when I say like, let's fix the ocean, oh my gosh, where do we begin? That gives me a stress headache, right? So when I say, let's start with ourselves, it's a lot easier, kinda, right? But when we look in our home as like, what are we eating on and what are we cleaning with? A lot of times the plastics in our home, the chemicals we use to clean are extremely volatile and they leach. And not only do they do that in our home, they do it long after in the environment. So if you think of your laundry detergent, your laundry soap, and I know, guys, this is a lot of information. I'm just touching on this. And this is just an FYI kind of for your information. But, you know, ideally we focus on what's going into our body. So food is huge. But this is also a factor. And some are more sensitive than others. So, and in this area too, you know, what you do matters. Your decisions to have that plastic at the party, or if you use disposable plates, those may be out of your sight, but they take thousands and thousands of years to decompose in the environment. And as those thousands and thousands of years are going, they're infecting our seafood. We're now finding more plastic in our seafood than ever before. Have you guys seen those news stories or heard that? We're finding what's called nanoparticles and microparticles of plastics. That comes from our everyday choices. So it's getting very interesting what it's going to be like in the near future. So that's kind of eating and cleaning. But again, hygiene and then household products. So with hygiene, like shampoos and face washes as well. I know a big movement is any face wash or hand soap with those micro beads you don't want, definitely. You know? And this is an area where I help my patients save money and just make life simpler, where you don't need a cleaner for the counters, and then a different cleaner for your sink, and then a different cleaner for your floor, and then a different cleaner. That's kind of a marketing ploy. Again, they want you to spend money on different cleaners. So really, I use one cleaner for all of that. And what is it? It's called Dr. Bronner's. Dr. Bronner's. It's my Windex. It's my all-purpose surface cleaner. It's my floor cleaner. It's everything. It's even my shampoo.
Can you spell it? Yeah.
So it's a doctor and then B-R-O-N-N-E-R-S. Dr. Bronner's.
Where do you find it?
And you find it everywhere. everywhere. But it's Amazon. But yeah, it's Amazon, it's Target, it's Albertsons, it's the specialty store, Mother's. I think even Trader Joe's, if I'm not mistaken, carries it or has a brand, like their own brand of it, but it's the same idea. So it's called a Castile soap. Yeah, so it's a Castile, but they'll have other ingredients. So they'll have extracts from different nuts and oils and like castor oil and things like that. And great question, I heard you. Does it sanitize? So the idea of a sanitizer is that it kills, right? Well, really, for the most part, you're not going to kill everything. And even if you kill what's on the surface, within 5 seconds, it'll have a whole new set right back. So the idea is that with soap, it makes it slippery and all the microorganisms go away. That's the idea with soap, essentially. When you wash your hands with soap, you're just making your hands slippery and the bacteria fall off your hands. And that's a great method. That's a great method. Because what we're finding is with sanitizers or antibacterials, you're also killing the good bacteria. You're killing the good microorganisms as well. So that's a whole nother area. But
bacteria comes back as soon as you wash it off.
Oh,
it goes right back.
there's no escaping microorganisms at all. So to think we could kill enough to protect us, that's kind of like insanity. There's no way. There's no way.
Well, anything that kills like on a smaller level, though, of course, surrounding ourselves with stuff
Exactly.
that kills all the time, that's also, we're just a really big organism.
Right.
It's probably not good for us to be around that all the time either. It just doesn't affect
Exactly.
us as quickly as it affects very small things.
Exactly. Yep. And then this kind of goes into then I make patients aware of what you're using, what your gardeners, if you have gardeners or landscapers, are using in the yard too. Because if you have pets or if you like to go outside, you end up tracking it back in. So a big one is like herbicides and pesticides you use around your house. The ant killers, the bait traps or anything like that. It's being aware of those things too. And this goes back to the animal production in America. And this kind of segues well with chemicals because, again, using those plastics and those herbicides and pesticides, it directly affects the animals. So one way is that when we're putting all these animals together, and mind you, there are 12 billion animals grown for food in the world. So that's more than people. And so when you have that, you're going to get sick a lot. Imagine if all the people in America lived in somewhere the size of Los Angeles. We'd get pretty sick pretty quick. And that's why most of the antibiotics that we produce go to our animals, 80% of the antibiotics. So when you guys hear news stories, or if you watch the news and you hear the word superbug, that's directly coming from animal production. It's not really from anything else. It's from animal production.
So they put it in their feed or they inject it?
So what happens is they're highly injected with antibiotics. Over time, these microorganisms develop immunities to these antibiotics, and these animals defecate and they walk in their feces. And when they're manufactured, feces are all over them, and so they end up in our food. And so when someone who's susceptible, like say an elderly population or a pregnant woman or a child, they go to the doctor or the hospital and they get an infection, and then that can spread in the hospital, or you get things like MRSA, you get other big infections that don't usually work with conventional antibiotics, and that's happening more. And it's almost like, we don't hear about this enough. And it kind of goes with, this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, the meat and dairy. And so that, there's reasons why we don't hear about this enough as we should. So, and with that, so even with the superbugs and the feces all over our food, and when I say that, it's true. And that's why you guys remember Jack in the Box closed down, or they went bankrupt in the 90s, I believe, or early 2000s. That was because they had an E. coli outbreak. So they weren't training their staff properly to cook the meat. So E. coli is another, when you hear E. coli outbreak, think of poo all over the food. That's basically what it is. That's it, right? So that's why there's E. coli all over the food, is because there's feces all over the food. And that's why we have strict, that's why you see those temperature meters in food service, when you go to a buffet and they're checking temperatures, they have to heat it up enough so it kills those bacteria so it doesn't start an outbreak. Now, with this, you can kill a bacteria, but bacteria makes a byproduct. Microorganisms also poop, and they poop toxins. And no matter how much you heat or how much stomach acid you have, you can't kill something that's not alive. Toxins are not alive. You can maybe denature them a little bit, but they persist. And that's why when you eat animal products, you get this endotoxemic effect. You get inflammation. And that's why, and it manifests differently for everybody. But so, I've introduced so many factors to you right now, and I know it can be overwhelming, but I'm just trying to kind of skim the surface, and it's part of this awareness. But you factor in this endotoxemic effect, animal fats, pesticide, herbicide, plastics, and it can seem daunting and overwhelming, but it's no wonder so many of us are sick, and this is the reality. I like to share truths, because we are in an obesity epidemic, we are in a diabetes epidemic, we're having a lot more neurological diseases. And part of making a change is realizing there's a problem. And that's something I like to share, is there is a problem. And these things are all connected. And so another aspect of this is between 25 to 75% of antibiotics pass into the animal manure, like we said, unchanged. And then it goes into our water as well. So that's the reality. Well, think of where bottled water comes from. Most of it comes from the tap. Or if you're doing Arrowhead's mountain spring water, it's coming from a spring, but they're bottling it in a spring, which is is either an underwater aquifer or it's coming from the mountains, but you're still getting impurities in it. And if it's in an aquifer, then it's coming from our agriculture up in Bakersfield, where they flood the plains and then it goes down into a sediment. So you're still getting pesticide and herbicide exposure. So don't drink water. No, I'm just kidding. No, so where do I get my water? This is, I like just the glass of this Voss, but my water, I highly recommend a reverse osmosis filter. That filters most of everything. RO filter, yeah.
What you mentioned was I got a study done on my food that I eat, and for 50 years, I found out I was extremely allergic to eggs, and I was extremely allergic to mushrooms, and I was extremely allergic to my favorite, which is cranberries and blueberries. Not a little, but a lot. And so when I stopped eating those foods, my inflammation in my stomach started going away. Mm-hmm. But and so I've changed my diet a lot and getting more towards a plant-based. But even that, barley and some of the wheats were just making my stomach so inflamed.
Right.
That and meats were really actually chicken and turkey. Actually, turkey was the only thing that
you could do.
That I could do that wouldn't bother my stomach.
Yeah.
I suggest maybe if you have problems with foods, and they're actually a lot worse than you think.
Well, yeah, and this, but going into the environmental aspect is that these toxins or these byproducts can amplify those effects. If it's a food allergy, or if it's an inflammation, or if it's a migraine or diabetes, it amplifies things. And what we're finding is, he mentioned food allergy, is that a certain primary ingredient in most pesticides or a herbicide is glyphosate. And that can actually bind to certain food ingredients and make your gut more permeable. So it's almost like a leaky gut. And so if you were to take a reading the next day at the doctor's and see what you're allergic to, whatever you ate, you might be allergic to. And then if you stopped or decreased your glyphosate, the residue, you might not be allergic to that anymore. So a lot of times these chemicals alter things. That's kind of going really deep, but don't worry. But what I'm saying is, the chemicals that we put into our environment affect us. What I always say is without a healthy environment, there's no way we can have a healthy body, healthy human. We're all one, we're all connected. There's no separation whatsoever.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you not get immunity by having something for whatever time? That doesn't get immunity.
In this case, I mean, no. I mean, in this case, if certain foods are yeah, it's hard to say. You're not going to really get an immunity. So, for example, we're finding some of these pesticide residues give you almost like a false celiac disease, where what celiac disease is you've all heard of gluten, right? So these big proteins called gluten, if you're celiac, they just pound your small intestine we have all these little fingers that help us absorb in our small intestine. And when you have celiac, those fingers get destroyed and damaged. And then you get all that bloating, you get all that pain, and you're not absorbing your nutrients right. You get diarrhea and all these issues. So there's really no immunity for that. In that same way, some of these environmental toxins almost mimic that behavior. And there's no way you could be immune, or if you eat more of these toxins, your body's not gonna say, hey, okay, let's work with this. It's kind of just finding ways to limit them and then get to foods that help kind of heal your body. That's kind of the effort, and that's kind of the goal.
I think when you eat a certain way, you kind of do get used to it, or you get used to how you feel. So you may not feel that great
Right.
all the time, but then it's hard to identify which of all the things I'm eating is causing me to not feel great.
Right.
And it kind of takes, like, there's also something called the elimination diet, where you go to a
Yes.
really simple diet, let all the inflammation calm down, let your system calm down, and then reintroduce foods, and then you're able to identify if you are sensitive to something or if you're okay to eat that. But I think a lot of people, we had introduced nutrition at an exercise boot camp I did last year. We talked about nutrition and got into some of these topics, and there were quite a few people who started transitioning more towards a plant-based diet, and they said, I feel so much better now. I didn't even realize
Right.
how bad I felt before until
Right.
I changed my diet. And then you kind of notice that whenever you eat something that's not that great, you notice it more at that time, because otherwise you're actually feeling pretty good.
Right. And there's so many factors to this in our lives, and this is true for everyone, where, if you're on medication and you're doing caffeine and you're doing sugar, how do you know really how you're feeling? Because those things are masking kind of the body's true energy in a sense. So until we kind of do this elimination diet, the example I give is you cut your arm, and in order to heal that, you kind of have to put a bandage over it, right? You kind of have to take it out of the picture. You're covering it. And in the same way, that's our diet. We're going to kind of take away a lot of foods. We're going to protect ourselves and kind of protect ourselves even from certain foods until we heal. And then we can take that bandage off and start introducing new foods to our system. In the same way, you take the bandage off, and now I can go for a swim, or I can, play with my grandkids, and I'm not worried about bleeding or opening the wound up again. So it's that kind of protective time to kind of lower the inflammation and heal on the inside in the same way on the outside.
I'm sure the elimination diet has changed a lot in 50 years.
Uh,
But when I went through it, you started with meat. And that was it. I got so sick of steak.
yeah.
But
What was
Yeah.
eliminated then? It was eliminating fruits and vegetables?
you had soy milk, soy bread, and steak. That's all I could eat.
It's changed a lot. Yeah. So it's changed a lot. So, I mean, even on an elimination diet, you're going to eat pretty well, and you're not going to, I mean, again, everyone's different, where if you've had some tests done, if you are allergic to certain things, when you work with a health professional, they factor all that in, and they put you on the right elimination diet, and you do it step by step to add on more foods and see how you feel, definitely. All right, so now hitting back on a question that was asked earlier of what kind of cows eat, this is kind of what they eat. It's usually like a genetically modified corn, soy, alfalfa sprouts, and cotton. So if they have leftover cotton that they didn't get to pick, or it was kind of went bad, the issue with this too is that what happens when you have something like alfalfa just sitting in a barn for a long time? Mold, very good. Mold and mildew or mice or rats. So it's sprayed heavily with pesticide and herbicide. And do you think they wash it off for these cows? No way. So,
and basically no nutritional value except for calories.
right, it's just mainly calories for the most part. And so, and again, the way it's grown with heavy fertilizer on the same land year after year. So there's really little to no, I would say, nutritional value. And when you think of the cows that were, I mean, even 100 or 200 years ago, where they're eating grass and cloves, I mean, all these wonderful greens, that's when I would say, hey, yeah, you want to have a little milk or a little meat here and there? Not a big deal, you know, or probably good for you. But things have changed so much. But if you look on a milk carton, you still see the farm picture, right? If you see a commercial or any product, you're going to see a farmer with a pitchfork or whatever. That the idea is still there. The romance is still there, but the reality is not. And that's kind of the truth. And it's different, though, in different countries. But for the most part, I'm talking about in the United States. Yeah.
In Europe, I think the cows are all grass-fed.
I mean, yeah, some parts, I mean, it varies now because Europe's kind of followed, or we kind of share some similar techniques. But I mean, for the most part, what Europe is better with doing is labeling. Like they label genetically modified ingredients. They label a lot of colors and artificial food additives and things like that, whereas we're not as transparent in labeling. So that's even one initial step where, hey, why don't we label everything appropriately? And that's a great first step so we actually know. And then if we see something that says genetically modified or this may cause cancer, we're going to be like, why is this in my milk? Wait a minute. And more people will start to become aware. So that's a big thing. But this is kind of, overall though, guys, I like to keep it simple. I do, despite what I just said, no, despite my whole talk. No, but it's really going back to just eating whole foods. And I deal with different populations. So whether I deal with populations who can't afford organic or aren't near organic foods. So that's not to say if you're around fruits and vegetables and beans and grains and nuts and seeds that aren't organic, don't eat them. Oh my gosh, no. I mean, even non-organic foods are still great if they're whole foods. Okay, it's better than not eating them. Okay, ideally it'd be great if you could do organic. If you were, start with animal products. That's the most bang for your buck, definitely. And again, so it's looking for things like USDA organic. There's a labeled non-GMO project, which is good. And so GMO, it's a controversial topic, but whether or not you're pro-genetically modified, and we're not really going to get into that, but it's more so the fact that, the fact is clear that it's sprayed more with herbicide and pesticide. I mean, that's what it's designed to do. So when you see a label that says non-GMO, you can kind of think less herbicide, pesticide, less kind of chemicals on that food. There's American grass-fed or there's free range as well.
For meat, does it have to say what country that animal was raised in? Because I heard on the news that one of the trade things is that we're going to be getting a lot more chicken from China. And I feel like they don't have the same restrictions and standards in China. You are correct.
You know, I was following the TPP, so that was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but it was kind of shut down. But you can be sure they're coming up with a new one. And so, I don't know, I can just speculate, but again, I'm not going to speculate too much, but the goal of a company, right, with their board members is to say, let's increase profits every quarter. So if increasing profits mean we're going to grow our chicken here and send it to South America or China for it to be processed and then send it back, you bet they're going to do that. You bet they're going to do that. And that's something that's been suggested.
So is it labeled where the animal was raised on meat or no?
I think
don't have to label that.
No. So in most places when you get a ground meat, you're getting ground meat from several different cows. And they're not going to tell you some of the cow came from California, some of the cow came from South America. but South America is becoming a large producer of red meat. And again, this connects back to the environment for the fact that poor rural farmers in South America are cutting down the rainforest in order to make grassland or just a lot to hold their cattle. And that's kind of what's happening. Or they're cutting it down to grow crops to feed cattle. And when you think of what the Amazon rainforest is, it's one of the biggest lungs in our planet. And if we're chopping it down to grow meat, it's not ideal. And I didn't even get into the fact that you can feed, with what we feed, one cow can feed, a couple dozen of people. So the efficiency of us feeding a cow all that grain or all that protein and all that, just to get less food out of it. If you're a businessman or you're any type of economist, it's not a rocket science to know, hey, we're putting in more and getting less. That's not sustainable. That's not a good model, especially as our population increases. So that's a big aspect of it as well. So that's the part where be aware of your environment. It's all of our environment. It's our environment for our future generations. So again, it's taking things where eating more whole foods, it's kind of just being aware of where your food is coming from, but the result is all the same. It's kind of just the awareness. It's just being aware. And that's why I say the most important thing you can do when you look on a product is read the ingredients. Read the ingredients. That's the best thing before calories, before fat, sugar, it's reading the ingredients. Yep.
I haven't heard you say anything about bread.
Bread? Yeah. So yeah, I eat bread. And so there's a lot of great breads. My top 3 breads. Are you ready for my top 3 breads? If you're new to healthy bread, I recommend Dave's Killer Bread.
Which is at Costco. And there's one that has like maybe I think 1 or 2 grams of sugar. That's the lowest one. Because don't be fooled. There's a lot of different kinds of Dave's Killer Bread. Some have up to like 5 or 6 grams of sugar. So I recommend the lower one. I think it's like a green or red package. I believe so. So Dave's Killer Bread. Huh? Oh, it's like a great multi-grain seed bread, but it's delicious. It's sliced bread, sandwich bread. It's delicious. And so you're getting wonderful nutrition in that bread.
In regards to the chickens from China,
Uh-huh.
is it true that anything that comes from another country has to go through inspection by the FDA and the health staff?
So
Like in the free trade agreement, many of the Mexican trucks could not come to the States because they were not up to date with the American trucks.
right,
A Mexican truck might be able to do this and they will not allow it.
right.
So the same with food and inspecting and
So I don't know all the ins and outs with the FDA, but I'll speculate on a very recent news story where with organic, I believe it was organic soy, it left, I want to say China or Asia, non-organic, and by the time it arrived in one of the LA ports, it was organic. And that was investigated. If you look up the Cornucopia Institute, they broke that story and are reporting on it. And so how did that happen? What they found out was bribery. If you bribe the right people, you bypass FDA regulations. And who would know if someone wasn't? The FDA, it's a big agency. Piece of food. On paper, they will, or the USDA with the FDA, but not really. And so that's where, you follow the Organic Consumer Association or the Cornucopia Institute. That's what I follow, and I kind of stay on track and kind of help my patients kind of navigate that. But yeah, we live in a world where we're driven by money, and yet we're not realizing that our health is what pays the price at the end. That's my belief, at least.
Yeah,
What?
so number 1 bread was Dave's
yes.
Killer Bread.
Yes, Dave's Killer Bread. No, Dave's Killer Bread is my number 3 actually. So I say if you're starting, it's a great bread, because as we go up to my number 1, the breads get a little more dense, and they're not as soft, but they're good still, and they're very nutritious. So number 2 is Ezekiel bread. So they're great. They use sprouted grains. It's very healthy. And all these are great prices too. Ezekiel is at almost everywhere now. Yeah, Sprouts and Trader Joe's, and I feel like a lot of Mothers. Yeah. Number one, I'd say in terms of health is manna bread, or I think they're called Manna Organics.
M-A-N-A?
M-A-N-N-A. And that's great bread. And they make kind of sweet flavors where they add like walnuts and banana and dates in them. And it's that I've seen at Whole Foods. Yeah, but again, if you could do Ezekiel or Dave's Killer, you're good. I mean, but Manna is really good. They're kind of a newer company, but delicious company. They make quality. They also make nut butters and spreads, and really tasty and delicious. I think Mothers and Whole Foods are carrying Manna right now, and they're coming. The what?
Your 2-year-old, what's her favorite bread?
She eats Ezekiel and Manna. She kind of eats So we make sandwiches with the Ezekiel bread.
How about rice?
Rice? So with rice, think of rice like fruits and vegetables in a sense that you want to get a color of the rainbow. We're not familiar that rice comes in purple and black and red. So the idea is don't just eat white rice and don't just even eat brown rice. Eat wild rice. They call it forbidden rice, but it's a purple rice. So you're getting a whole grain and you're also getting all those yummy colors because that just means more of those antioxidants and coenzymes. So eat rice. Rice is great. You could do brown, but I recommend wild or any other colored rice.
And pretty much not white rice. Like
And
ideally not because what they've taken off is the fiber, is the color and.
They bleach it? Is that what they do?
I think it's more that they process it and they kind of separate like different parts of the rice, right?
Right. Yeah. So there's components of rice like an endosperm and a husk and everything. So basically the rice is just the starchy component of like 4 or 5 other pieces of the rice, and it's all been stripped away. And so white rice, you can essentially think of white rice as sugar in a sense because, when you go to a Thai restaurant, you get that sticky rice. Why it's so sticky is because there's so much starch and sugar. And that's why you chew it and it melts in your mouth almost. And
that's why you can eat so much sushi, back when I ate sushi,
right.
without feeling that full.
Exactly. Because it kind of there's no fiber there. Remember, fiber, when it's connected to fiber, you get that fullness effect. You get that time release effect. Again, we're not binging on Brussels sprouts for a reason because of that fiber, right? And probably the taste.
And the sulfur, yeah.
And the sulfur, yeah. But it's a big aspect. But great questions. And let's see, I think, that was a question. But I want to open it up to any other questions, kind of going back to anything I went over. You had a,
What's your opinion on soy?
On soy, so great question. So soy has some of the best isoflavonoids. And these are cancer protective, and for anyone with Parkinson's disease, they're neuroprotective as well. And there's been some bad talk about soy where it boosts estrogen and it's going to give you cancer. So one of the recent studies, unless you had 58 servings of soy in a day, then you'd maybe start to get some negative feedback, and even that was questionable. So if you're a real soy lover, then be careful, and you're eating over 58 servings a day, which I doubt any of you are. But another point of soy is think of it on a spectrum of processed food. So you want to eat things like edamame. And so edamame is like a young soybean, and it's great. It comes in the pod. Again, the whole food aspect.
Eat the pod?
No, not eat the pod, but I'm saying it comes in the pod, and you kind of just eat it out of the pod. But again, it's more that whole food. So for the most part, we eat a lot of edamame, organic edamame, as opposed to eating more soy or like a tofu.
What about like a sprouted, like a tempeh?
Right, yeah, tempeh, where it's a fermented soybean or something. That's great too. Yep.
Yeah, and really when they've done studies, it reduces rates of cancer,
Right.
even breast cancer. So the
Yep.
estrogen, it's not like estrogen that's in our body. It's
Right.
a different.
It's a phytoestrogen. So this kind of goes back to how there's still things in plants we don't understand where they can even mimic hormones, but then give us a positive effect for our own hormones. So it's amazing, and we still are learning more and more. So eat soy.
And they're really good for fiber and protein too.
Definitely.
Can people be allergic to soy?
Yes. So yeah, you could be allergic to soy. And recently though, we've seen more allergies to soy, but again, soy is one of the biggest genetically modified crops in the United States. So is it the fact that we spray heavy loads of herbicide and pesticide on the soy, or is it the actual soy? That's up for debate now.
That's because it's subsidized by the government.
And soy is subsidized, yep.
So non-GMO, basically, for soy.
Non-GMO, so kind of going back to, if you see, non-GMO, which a lot of soy and tofu and tempeh are, or organic, is great. And kind of what I do, like a sandwich, I kind of just slice my tofu sometimes, and I'll make a sandwich for my daughter in place of lunch meat. And I'll do like avocado and lettuce and tomato. I do that, what I like to do, that garlic spread I told you about. I take some avocado and mix it in the garlic spread so it almost makes like a creamy mayonnaise, like a garlic mayonnaise. Put it on the bread. It's delicious. Very good. I'm not a chef. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so I shop at Trader Joe's sometimes, but I'm just one person, so I should only be buying one of things. But they come in a package of 4.
Right.
And they're in a plastic tray, like a zucchini, and they have plastic wrap over the top.
Right.
What about the food living in that plastic for?
So for the most part, yeah, if you could get away from plastic, do it. But it being in like a refrigerated setting with plastic, for the most part, a lot of studies have shown when plastic's heated. So if you leave your water bottle in the car, if you have one of those plastic lids in your microwave, or like you're using like a frozen dinner with a plastic lining and you're nuking it for like 5 minutes, you're releasing more. But I mean, more so is environmental plastic. It's realizing that if it's that single-use plastic and you're throwing it away, you're just introducing it into the environment, and it's kind of a boomerang. It's gonna come back. It's gonna come back, whether it's in our seafood or in our water. So that's kind of more so the case to get away from plastic. Yeah, but definitely if you have plastic, don't heat it up. I would recommend it, and choose glass containers. Where they make glass Tupperwares, they make glass water bottles, and that's the best way. Because if I leave my water bottle in the car, I'm not really worried, as opposed to with plastic. Yeah, it might leach a little bit here and there. And everyone's different, so some are more susceptible, some aren't. It may take time, whereas others it's pretty quick. And so.
I read somewhere that it is better to, instead of eating 3 meals a day, to eat 5 times a day and without less food.
So I say eat when you're hungry. Eat when you're hungry. The only thing, I read a recent research study that was really good, and it talked about, I don't know, this has been very popular, intermittent fasting. So where you fast for certain hours of the day. What I like to call this is just, it's more like time frame eating. That's what I call it. So this study suggested that if you can eat within a 10 or 12 hour, 8 hour, if you want to be a hero, time frame, and that's your time to eat. So the example I give for this is, think of like a business. Think of Starbucks. It opens at a certain time and it closes at a certain time. It's not going to then reopen and close when you want a midnight snack, and then reopen and close if you want another snack later on. So it's the same kind of with our body. Remember all those reactions I showed you? There's a lot going on, especially as you eat. So if you contain that eating, let's say in a 12 hour, so you wake up at 8 and start eating, you stop eating at 8. And what they're showing is when you give that body, your adrenals, and all those metabolic functions time to calm down and rest, it improves muscle tone naturally. It helps balance your weight. It even can help you sleep better. If you're getting any indigestion or heartburn, GI issues, it's pretty amazing what can happen. And so that includes even things like it can vary, but things like tea and coffee, that includes that as well. So really, after that 12-hour window, you're just going to drink water,
In terms of meals, or let's say with Parkinson, since digestion can be slowed down sometimes, or digestion can be affected, so smaller meals might be helpful for the purpose of digestion or to avoid bloating.
Parkinson. Right? but let's say in that 12-hour time frame, yeah, smaller meals, and the idea of that when you're doing more of the fiber meals and chewing more, and even in this, if you're doing a more whole foods diet, you're going to find yourself eating more often. Like I eat every 2 hours. But again, it's not because I'm trying. It's just, I have maybe my smoothie bowl and toast, and then 2 hours later I'll have a Lara bar, and then 2 hours later I'll have my lunch. And so it kind of just happens. And so, but yeah, smaller meals, being mindful with eating, so we're not like scarfing in the car or watching TV. That plays into it too, where we're taking time to eat and relax, chew our food every 2 hours is great. It's great. Yeah.
What about dairy products?
Dairy products. So same idea. Like I said, one thing I mentioned was the fact that, so dairy, it's a breast milk from a cow. And so let's talk about milk. If we think of milk, what is breast milk from a cow intended for? To grow a calf, right? So, and when you think, how quick does a calf walk? Does anyone know? It's usually that day or the next day. I mean, it's usually that day. I mean, if it's the next day, it could be eaten, right? I mean, that's kind of how cows work. And so you're thinking of breast milk that's made to grow this small calf very quickly. And so there are growth factors in milk. There are other things in milk on top of the fact that we still pump our dairy cows with antibiotics and other things. So there are things in that milk that I really wouldn't recommend. And if a lot of the marketing spin has been on, well, it has the essential nutrients, it has protein and calcium and vitamin D, a lot of that's put in after the fact. So when you talk about pasteurization, you're really denaturing a lot of that protein, and you're really, so I mean, the fact that you need milk, you don't. If you invested the money you spent on milk and more leafy greens, you'd get the magnesium, the calcium, everything, vitamin C, other iron, and other nutrition on top of everything you'd get in milk. Mm-hmm. And when you think of a cow originally, it eats grass and leafy greens in order to be healthy. So, as far as dairy, and then as we go down the line, which is yogurt and cheese, it just becomes more and more processed, really, right? Again, we started with the milk, and now we're making cheese and yogurt. It becomes more addictive and more processed, and
what about almond milk and rice milk?
So yeah, almond milk. So those are some alternatives. Again, you want to read ingredients, even with almond and rice milk.
Because you said you had that in the morning. Right?
Yeah, I do almond milk. Yeah. So you want to read ingredients and look for a simple almond milk. And even with almond milk, they're going to add calcium and all those nutrients you get in. And you want
unsweetened, because they often add sweetener.
Exactly.
And then also for dairy, though, dairy is the one food group that has been associated with increased risk of Parkinson's. So there's 3 reasons. One is that neurotoxins that have been found in brains of people who had Parkinson's after they've died have the same neurotoxins that are found in the milk supply. That's one. The second one is that increasing your amounts of dairy and milk intake decreases your uric acid levels, and lower uric acid levels are related to increased risk of Parkinson's. And then the third one is galactose, actually, I think. Like a milk sugar is actually has been identified to be related. So
think of if you have a compromised GI, so we're talking about the mouth to the anus, galactose is going to be this big, nice sugar, and if you have leaky gut or you're having issues with your GI, it's going to come on in and kind of wreak havoc. And so that's one aspect, but I'm sure there's
so
many others.
So the first one is neurotoxins, and there are articles and there are videos on the website nutritionfacts.org that go through this in more detail. So I'll post in that email. We'll include all of this. But neurotoxins that have been found in the milk supply have also been found in brains of people who have Parkinson's. The second one is uric acid levels. So increased dairy intake lowers uric acid, and lower uric acid is related to increased risk of Parkinson's. And then the third one is galactose, because they have shown that it's more an intake of milk than cheese that seems to be related to Parkinson's. Then once you have Parkinson's, dairy is really like a gut, I don't know what the right word is, but it increases constipation, which is a common problem in Parkinson's, and just irritation in the gut. So dairy is really not good for us.
Is almond milk and rice milk?
Totally separate. So yeah, this is all dairy. This is all dairy milk.
Right.
Almond, yeah, any plant-based milk sources don't have any of those issues.
And plant-based protein as well, right?
Right, don't have the same issues as animal protein.
But
Right.
usually one says that yogurt is good to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, some things are better than others, and a lot of foods like that are good for a certain reason, like they have, protein. So protein is important, but what is that protein coming in? What else is in that food? Is it really a health food? And a lot of what we hear is marketing. So it's not really, we don't hear a lot of the science. We hear what those companies market to us because they're trying to sell a product. So that's not necessarily always the truth.
And this is where context is great, because how do we even start producing dairy if we want to go that road? I mean, it was with World War II, and we wanted to feed our soldiers, a more efficient product and a more easier product that wouldn't spoil. So we started doing canned and powdered milk in World War II, and we ramped up our dairy supply. Well, then after World War II, no more war, no more soldiers, overseas. Well, what are we going to do with all this dairy? Well, let's market it as a healthy bone builder, or hey, it's really great. If it's good enough for baby calves, it's good enough for us. And then it saturated our environment. But before then, we were fine without dairy. I mean, really. And so we just have to kind of look back, and this is where history is helpful, because then we see that we were fine pre-World War II. And then post-World War II, you look at the rate of disease. It's, again, it correlates, but it doesn't mean causation, but it's a factor, definitely. And when you see studies like this where it's linking to Parkinson's and other diseases, it's very alarming, very alarming.
Yeah.
Is
So
there any other way to get your uric acid levels down lower?
no, you want higher.
higher.
Yeah. There's plant-based sources of. It's not actual uric acid that you're eating. What's the precursor?
No, I'd have to
look it up
double
again.
check. But uric acid, so those acids are usually precursors of amino acid metabolism, and you're going to get all of the essential and all of the amino acids you need from plant-based sources as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be,
And Terry, was it?
Yeah, I raised my uric acid level with prunes.
Prunes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I specifically looked that up because I had heard that and my uric acid level was low, and I raised it 2 points.
Great.
Yeah, so it is 5:06 already, and it's Friday afternoon, so we have to let everyone go and let James go. But James, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think we'll definitely have to have you back, because I feel like there's lots of questions and a lot more to discuss. And we'll send you guys tons of information.